Okay, so I know I don't even know if it's a victory lap because I haven't talked to you about this. We haven't said one word about it since the news broke this week, where Nate the lawyer tweeted out Rekeita is getting 30 days in a county jail or something. That's
Yeah, which was
he's
also
doing
wrong. I mean,
jail
God
time.
bless him, but he really couldn't get literally
Well,
anything right when it came to the Nick Rekeita case.
so
I mean, I don't know how it is you can't read a sentencing doc, but it told me that whatever Nate says, his actual criminal defense experience must be just limited to New York or just really limited in general. Because I know how to read these things, and even though I don't practice in Minnesota very often, and a lot of people got that wrong. The short answer is the first we'll talk about the early predictions as to what was happening.
Oh, the early predictions were past the threshold, 25 years in jail, losing wife, losing kids, jail for a quarter century, like the rest of his life, he's gone. And people were loving it was a
and there was Schadenfreude enjoyment by a lot of these people who became obsessively hateful of Nick Rekeita. Mm-hmm. And some did it for personal profit. Some did it because treason is what runs in their blood, and they're just disloyal by nature. Some did it because they're utterly incompetent and not capable of analyzing the law from a practical experience. And then others just got caught up in the parade. So the allegations, early allegations of Nick Rekeita was like he was some sort of huge drug addict and drug user, and his kids were using drugs. And everybody's, all this crazy allegation. There was stuff like Nick Rekeita is running a cult. And blah, blah, blah. I mean, and we probably took more heat for just going through what the law is concerning Nick Rekeita, defending Nick Rekeita than probably anything else. I mean, even then outing,
remember, Robert,
Sidney Powell's weaknesses with her case and the Kraken, or outing how nuts Lynn Wood was becoming and Linsanity and so forth.
I think everybody does need to recall in the early stages, it was child neglect. Then there was the cocaine found in the kids' hairs. There was drugs and guns. There was the swinging stuff. I don't get into anybody else's familial life in that regard, but it was everything. It was how could you defend this child abusing, drug
people
abusing.
Create fake images of me as Breaking Bad, telling people how to get your kids hooked on cocaine. I got more smears, slurs, attacks. People would brigade into communities. Mm-hmm. If I was just doing any interview anywhere about Rekeita, they'd come bashing in, all this hate over a case they didn't know, over a person they didn't know. And especially I got a kick out of people who were somehow personally impacted. Like, how are you personally impacted? So whether, because Nick isn't able to do his show at the moment. I mean, come on. What I said was that, knowing Nick Rekeita, not knowing him great, but knowing him well enough, that most of the allegations, the scandalous allegations against him are likely untrue. That people should not rush to judgment of the case or the individual. That all kinds of people make mistakes. Nobody wants their personal life broadcast, to the whole world. Least of all the biggest mistakes they've ever made in their personal life. That's the principle of the Bible. Be careful what stones you throw, lest don't point out the little problem in somebody else's eye if you got a big stick out of your own. Those are good common sense principles and precepts to adapt in life. Kind of like expect the best, plan for the worst. Oh. And Nick Rekeita did that. He did the Donald Trump strategy. Expect the best, plan for the worst.
Simping for the Constitution for a quarter century. I love that.
Exactly. Indeed. And so the way in which you defend yourself in that kind of case is defending yourself in law and defending yourself in the court of public opinion. And defending yourself in law, the way you go about doing so in a drug case, is you figure out all the constitutional infirmities that may exist in the case. And I highlighted what those different constitutional infirmities are. Some people confuse that with me saying it was a magic bullet and all the case would be dismissed. That isn't why you do it. You do it knowing that most lower courts are not willing to challenge the prosecutor or police. But by documenting the seriousness and significance of those constitutional issues, it usually motivates the prosecutor and the police to consider a more reasonable plea negotiation terms. It's how almost all drug pleas get done. If you don't raise a search warrant or Fourth Amendment or constitutional issue in the way the case was prosecuted, you have very little leverage at getting a fair deal. Good logic to his credit. When he first got confused as to what I was saying, corrected that upon review. The second thing is I said the allegations about his kids were false. That there are easy ways to know they were false. That the allegations against him didn't make sense. The person that was making some of the people that were listed as making the allegations weren't in a position to make those allegations. There was obvious factual contradictions in the very original story.
And just so people understand, then the first-hand account of the children smelling and wearing dirty clothes and complaining about being hungry was allegedly the it was third party. It was like someone.
It was like rumor by 6 degrees of separation and multiple years out of context and a story that didn't even make sense on its own thing.
Well, but plus also, kids are dirty and kids are hungry, especially when they don't eat. You can feed them.
That's the reality of the world. So I mean, there was no kids using drugs. Kids weren't around drugs. Any of that. If you understood how those hair tests work, you knew that was going to be bogus and be rebutted very quickly. And so what I predicted was that many of the allegations against him were false. That he had good constitutional defenses, and that if he leveraged them correctly, he would get a reasonable disposition and would not end up losing his kids, losing his wife, losing his family, losing his business, or losing his liberty. In fact, I was right on this one. So, trusting in Nick paid off. I think Nick's made his mistakes. He's been public about those mistakes. I think he's been way too harshly attacked for those mistakes. There, but for the grace of God, go anybody. Mm-hmm. If you know anything about, the nature of drugs or certain substances, that people get caught up in that all the time. I mean, every day people are out there eating ultra processed food and destroying their bodies a lot quicker than Nick ever did. And so, let's be a little careful before we rush.
It is. I've never done cocaine in my life, full stop, period. I worked in the practice of law, and the amount of adults who I would have never otherwise suspected who did it blew my freaking mind. The amount of adults who had sex with other people blew my freaking mind. The amount of raging alcoholics, people with serious life issues, blew my freaking mind. So it's not to absolve.
And I also separate that from people causing deliberate harm to people, physically assaulting people, attack, etc. That's a big, big difference between those two, in my view. And so, I mean, as the state prosecutor acknowledged at sentencing, what Rekeita did was harm himself. He didn't harm anyone else. They said there were no other victims. So he got his family entirely back. In fact, the case was closed in record time for that county. So that shows you how bogus and false all the accusations against him concerning his kids were. It was meant to go at, because he takes one of his greatest prides and all the ridiculous amount of stuff he does for his kids. I mean, literally goes to every sporting event, takes them at all these homeschooling events. I mean, he's more actively promoting his interest of his kids than anybody I know, to be honest. As someone who did homeschool kids for a year, 2 years, I know how incredibly difficult that is. Least of all, if I got like five of them, and I'm running around in literally every single event they do. And I'm even teaching other homeschool kids in the process while trying to run a full story business. Good luck with that combination. I think that he put himself under a little bit too much stress, I think. But it turned out those allegations were false. That here's been the outcome. The outcome is all charges against him, other than a third degree drug charge, have been dismissed. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the gun charges dismissed. All the charges concerning his kids dismissed. They wouldn't dismiss those charges unless there was not a factual basis to do so. Number two, he is not serving any time. What he was given is what's called a deferred sentence, a stayed sentence. It's known as diversion or deferment in most jurisdictions. They stay the adjudication is the way they do it, the mechanism they do so in Minnesota. What does that mean? It means in 5 years, let's say he complies with everything, all charges are dismissed. He's not even a felon. He doesn't lose gun rights, voting rights, any of it. And he's not serving any time in jail. The jail is, if he doesn't comply with probation, then he can end up going to jail. That's not going to happen. He will not serve another day in any prison, thanks to the smart way he went about approaching it, which was in the court of public opinion. People were demanding he say things that made no sense. Come out and confess. Come out and say everything you did wrong. Come out and say everything you did bad. That's ridiculous. You can't do that in the middle of a criminal case. And he properly prevented them from misusing and abusing. One of the things I highlighted was governments now are routinely and regularly, and they're going to be doing it in more cases. They're going to be doing it in political cases, kind of like they did in the Ben case, like they're threatening to do in the state of Washington and Colorado to everybody. They don't use the right pronouns for their kids. They weaponize taking your kids away. And they love to do so while they bring a criminal case against you. Why? Because in order to defend yourself, to keep your kids, you have to give away your Fifth Amendment rights that puts you in prison forever under the criminal cases. He rightly demanded that they give him use immunity. You say you only care about my kids. I want to tell you the whole story, but I can't do so if it's going to be used against me in the criminal case. So they finally conceded. He didn't take the bait of disclosing. A lot of parents panic and give up their entire Fifth Amendment defense because they want their kids back. He made the right sound decision to require one for the other, to require use immunity in order to do that. And ultimately, when they investigated, he hadn't harmed his kids, period. That was all false. Bottom line is he harmed himself. Yes, he himself has publicly said, did drugs he wishes he hadn't done. He's been clean and sober now ever since the arrest. How do you know that? Because he has to do testing 5 days out of the week. And so a lot of the accusations and allegations against him were false. A lot of people rushed to judgment. A lot of people rushed to hate him. And there were a bunch of people that abandoned constitutional liberty because they thought it was useful to do so in the name of grift baiting their way into getting followings online and cash support. In other cases, I think in like Nate's case, I think just wrong, just not.
Well, no, no,
he just got a lot of stuff wrong. But a lot of them were like way wrong, dead wrong, totally wrong, wholly wrong, and a lot of them personally attacked me repeatedly. Sent people to brigade various chats to attack me. I don't really care. I mean, these people were on the low end of the totem pole to begin with, but they were miseducating the public about their rights, the public about what is the right way to handle this situation. So Nick Rekeita is back. Apparently, he's going to be trying to live stream next week, part of the Karen Reed trial. That she's getting tried again. This is someone who never should have been tried in the first place, in my opinion. There isn't evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that she was guilty. There is evidence, in my view, beyond a reasonable doubt of cop corruption in those cases. But Nick is back, and he's back to being Nick. So,
yeah, I think
good luck to him. I'll be happy to hop on with him at some point. I think he's a good man who got railroaded. He made mistakes like every human being on the planet, and a lot of people treated him too harshly, rushed to judgment, made up facts about the law to demonize him and line in their own pockets, and they should be ashamed. And for those that want to write an apology, once again, always send the apologies courtesy of Viva Frag.
I was going to say, Nate said he's jail time damn because he was retweeting Kiwi Farms. Even if you went into Kiwi Farms, like I showed you guys there, it said 30 day, deferral if he complies.
So, yeah, stick my head in a vice before I ever, some of the Kiwi Farms people I represented in the past, as a favor to Nick, did it for dirt cheap, got him out of a difficult situation for ridiculous low cost, at which all they did is complain later. When I was defending Nick Rekeita's constitutional rights and interests and discouraging a rush to judgment against him, I'll tell Nick, one of the worst clients I ever had was one I did as a favor to Nick.
Well, someone said, everybody gets things wrong. Everybody gets things right. Everybody makes mistakes, but
I don't mind the mistakes. But if you're going to go out there and do things that miseducate people about their constitutional rights, that's when I take personal affront.
Everyone thought it was fair game to jump on Nick that way because he had done it to other people in non-legal context prior, where he made some good content out of destroying people, which I think was,
going at him personally to a certain degree, understand, but they were miseducating people about the law.
Well,
they were saying things about the Fourth Amendment that were completely wrong. They were saying things about the Fifth Amendment that were completely wrong. They were saying things about the Sixth Amendment that were completely wrong. They were saying things about state Minnesota law that were completely wrong. They were saying things about how you handle the criminal. I mean, these idiots were like, prostrate yourself, go public and confess all of every bad act you did. That would have guaranteed him years in prison and he would have lost his family. These are people I would never hire as any kind of lawyer. You got that, Jabba the Hutt, lookalike there, potentially criminal. His legal advice is potentially criminal. I mean, this was legal malpractice, some of the idiocy that was out there concerning Nick Rekeita. I'm glad because I think he's a good guy trying to do good work, whatever his mistakes may be along the way. So I'm glad to see him back on his feet and going. I'm glad because I like the Constitution to be affirmed and upheld in this country. And I like people to fight for it, as Nick Rekeita has done, and a lot of these other people have not.